The 59th CD, the second to the last CD in the RCA Albums box set, is the From the Vaults 60s. There's the artwork, which is era appropriate recording tape from what the recording studios would have used. The earliest parts of this are from the first three tracks are from the Frank Sinatra Timex special. Excuse me, including the duet that he did with Frank Sinatra on "Love Me Tender" and "Witchcraft." There's a solo version of "Lonely Man," which would have been in "Wild in the Country." There's a duet version of "Today, Tomorrow, and Forever" with Anne Margaret. That was originally released on the Today, Tomorrow, and Forever box set back in the early 2000s. That's actually a really pretty version of the song. The alternate title song for Roustabout, "I'm a Roustabout," which was first released in 2003 on Second to None, is on here. Then there's a huge span of home recordings that stretch from, I think most of them are from like 1965, 1966. And this has always been the most fascinating thing to me, because they fill in so much about what was going on with Elvis creatively in the 60s that didn't show up in the movies. I mean, he does "If I Loved You," which is Oscar's Rodgers Hammerstein song, like "You'll Never Walk Alone." It's actually from the same musical, Carousel. But if you've ever heard Roy Hamilton's version of "If I Loved You," it's very apparent that Elvis's version on the home recording is directly inspired by it. The phrasing is almost identical that Elvis does. "What Now, My Love?" There's an early version of that on this that I think he does with, I think it's Red West and Charlie Hodge as a home recording. And of course he would later revisit that on Aloha from Hawaii as like a full band song. But it's interesting to hear this version. It's very different arrangement-wise. There's a bunch of gospel music. "Write to Me from Naples," "My Heart Cries for You." "Dark Moon" is a particularly standout track. There's a version of "Suppose" that was a home recording that was actually overdubbed. There was a point in the 60s where they had kind of started thinking about doing what they ended up doing in the 70s to get Elvis to record music at home, and then they would add on to it in the studio later. Only one of those ever actually got made, and it never really got released until much later, but it was "Suppose" from Speedway. So that tells you how much Elvis thought of that song, that he was working on it at home before it was in the movie. It's definitely interesting. The 68 comeback special versions of "It Hurts Me" and "Let Yourself Go," which were cut from the original TV broadcast and are left off the album, appear here. The studio jam from 1969, "It's My Way This Time" and "I Can't Stop Loving You." One of those, I want to say it's "This Time," was a Chips Moman song. So he was kind of just goofing off with Chips and the band in the studio. And, it's actually a pretty solid version of "I Can't Stop Loving You." I know he ended up going back to that for a live recording, but that actually is pretty solid on its own. And then lastly is "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" the Laughing version. If you haven't heard that, I definitely recommend you go look that up, because there are probably 3 recordings that Elvis did that are, I mean, they're practically comedy recordings in and of themselves, even though they're just breakdowns of what happened. Elvis just completely loses it. One was "A Dog's Life" for Paradise Hawaiian Style, some of the outtakes for that. Another was Beach Shack, which was for Spin Out, I think. No, I don't care. But Beach Shack was the other one, and Are You Lonesome Tonight? He just completely loses it on stage. It's hilarious. So it's actually a good way to close this out. Disc 2. And disc 59 of 60 of the RCA albums collection. So that's second to the last one. We'll close it in on the end.